Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca. Today we're going to finish our autumn panel for our Winging It project. We've been looking at the Olympics this month using circles to create the Olympic logo. Last week we made our medals table, and this week, as the summer is drawing to a close and we're all getting ready to go back to work and school, I thought it might be nice to give ourselves a moment of pause where we could just do some calm, slow stitching and make those Olympic rings a little bit more subtle on our background. So it's going to be really simple stuff today. You need some threads, a needle, a pair of embroidery scissors, and if you have some rubber washers or some small ring items, that would come in really handy as well. But it's not essential. Really, this one is totally up to you. So gather all your bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
So last week we added our medal band and we gave ourselves a medal for an achievement. This was the technique called furrowing that we learnt last week that's created a lovely textured medal. And so what we need to do now is add some more decorative stitch, and I'm hoping that this is going to sort of tone down the Olympicness of it. I want the Olympics obviously to be front and centre, but we didn't really want to create a pure Olympic piece. So I've got some bits and pieces. I've got a couple of circle templates. Apologies that they're quite difficult to see. So I've got one with larger circles and one with smaller circles, and I have found some threads in my Olympic colour scheme. So I've got some pearl cottons and I've got some just normal embroidery threads. You can bring in whatever type of thread you like here, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to start by adding some circles. Now, the other thing we wanted to sort of signify in this piece, well, I wanted to anyway, is that it is the month in which a 21st birthday occurs in our household. So I wanted to kind of signal that by putting 21 rings. So I've already got 6. Some of them are going to be very small. Some of them will be a bit larger. I'm going to start though by making sure I'm not putting things outside of the visible space. So I'm just going to pop my aperture on there, and I'm going to put some markers around the edge. So I'm just going to put a marker in each corner and then join those up. And that way we're not going to end up spending ages stitching something that isn't going to be visible. So now I'll get my ruler and just join up those markers. Tricky having a very brightly coloured background. I'm just putting some dash lines, I just want an indication, really. Now I'm going to do rings for this because I don't want to cover over too much of this background. I want the bubbles to be maintained. So we're just going to sketch in some circles. This one I'm going to start with down here is going to go off the edge. So I'm going to put one there. So I'm going to keep a tally. Let's get a bit of paper. So that's 7. Let's have one joining up these circles here. 8. A little one down here. That's 9. I'm going to put one just inside the red. 10. and let's start with that. So we're up to 10. I'm keeping a little note to the side of me. So we're just going to work with those circles that we've put in. Need to just remember where they are down here. So what we want to try and do is balance colour, and I've got some yellow down here. I would like to make sure there's a good scattering of colours, so I'm not going to do this circle here in yellow. Let's start with some red. So I'm going to start with some pearl cotton, and we're just going to use some different stitches to create our circle. So let's start by doing a blanket stitch circle. I think that might be nice. So we'll start by having our bars coming in, I think. So blanket stitch, we're going to start on our line. We want to create a loop with our thread. This is one of our looped stitches. So I'm going to imagine there's a little box on the surface, and we want to go corner to corner in our box. So I'm going to go diagonally down, rock my needle back up to the edge of that circle and make sure it passes over that loop of thread that I created, and when I pull through I end up with a little right angle stitch. So then I move along a little bit and do that again. If you need a slower tutorial, I do have a whole playlist of stitch tutorials that I'll link up there, and you can go and check that out. There are loads of stitches on there. You can also check it out in my B stitches video for our stitch A to Z. It's in there as well. So I'm just going to work my way around this circle. Now, do I go over the yellow or under it? Maybe I'll go over. So this is the rigid circle that we created with our bangle. I'm just going to stitch through the wool to make my blanket stitch go over the surface. So it looks like it's overlapping. So I hope you're having a great summer. I'm filming this on GCSE Results Day in the UK, so best wishes to all of the students who are getting their results. And it's getting to that time now where we all start thinking about term starting. I know in Scotland you might already be back at school, but it's definitely starting to feel like the end of the summer here. So when you're close to the end, you want to try and space your stitches so that you can place one in between that ends up where you started, and that will give you the illusion of a circle that has no start or finish. So there's my first circle. We're just going to do lots of different stitches, different ways to slow stitch, so hopefully this will give you lots of ideas for your other slow stitch projects as well. So that takes us up to 7 circles. I'm not going to stitch all of them on camera in real time, just want to give you some ideas. Alright, so let's go with a yellow circle next. These are kind of the strongest colours to balance. and I think I'm going to go up here with this one, and let's do a really super simple one. Let's do a running stitch circle. So I think we'll go over the top of the red and underneath the black. So I'm going to start right at the edge of that black couch circle. You may have noticed, by the way, that I added a few more bars in that sparkly thread to that black circle. I just felt like it was too loose, it was too baggy, and wanted to couch it down a little bit more, so I did go back in with that glitter thread and add some more bars across. I really love a running stitch circle. If you've seen my book sleeve videos, this is something I get very carried away with for reasons I can't really account for, to be honest. Okay, so I'm going to go off the edge there, finish off my thread, and then I'll restart it. I don't want a big trail of thread across the back. So slow stitch is really all about just the process. So I think the point this week is to just use this as a restful regrouping at the end of the summer, just before everything kicks back off again. And as you know, Rick, my husband, is a teacher. I used to be a school teacher, and so for me September really is all about beginnings. It's what I've always considered to be the start of the year, and I think while you still have school age children, I think lots of people think in that way. So this is a kind of deep breath before the plunge, to quote Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. I'm actually going to go around that again. I'm going to go around a second time, so that will actually take us up to 11. Okay, I thought we could work on this one here, and because it's quite a large circle and just a partial circle, we can do a more adventurous stitch. So I've got some black pearl cotton here, and I thought it'd be nice to do a fly stitch circle. I really like fly stitch when it's worked in the round. If you do too small a circle, it can be quite tricky to space it, but on a circle like this with just a gentle curve, there shouldn't be any problem. So I brought my thread through. I'm going to hop across my line for my circle, and then I'm going to rock my needle down and come out on the line a little bit further down. Make sure my needle passes over that loop of thread and pull through, and then we're going to put a little straight stitch and rock the needle back up to just across from the bottom of that first V stitch, like that. Hop across horizontally, rock up, back on the line at the bottom of that straight stitch. So it's basically a series of Y-shaped stitches that are all interlocked, all joined together. So whatever stitches you enjoy making, whatever you enjoy sewing, it's an opportunity for you to just play, do something that you enjoy, choose your favourite stitches, and add as many circles as you like. I'm going to add 21 in total. You don't have to do that many if you don't want to. We're just going to embellish and stitch our panel in the most restful way that we know how. So this panel has been mostly a bit of a brain break. We've reverted to childhood to make our background, and the rest of the time it's been relatively simple techniques, relatively simple stitching, just to enjoy the process. So that's that one. Let's just do one more. Well, maybe we do one in each colour, and then I'll just have given you plenty of ideas, and then you can just feel free to play and stitch the rest as you wish. So I'm going to do two things here, I think, in this blue. I keep looking at that yellow dashed circle and I feel like it needs something. So what I'm going to do is bring my thread up just where it's going to be out of the frame, and I'm going to slide my needle underneath from the bottom, underneath that pair. Don't want to pull it really tight, just tight enough that it sits flat, and then I'm going to go back down underneath the next pair of stitches like that. Then I can go along and go up. So this is like a laced stitch. You can use the eye end of the needle if that helps to not constantly catch the stitches. So I'm going up through one and then down through the next, and because I've gone off the edge, I'm going to get away with not having counted, because really you need an even number, and I don't know that I do have an even number. So here I can go underneath, and I think I would have gone up, and so I'm going to come down this one because we're trusting that the black would have covered another pair of stitches, so I want it to look like it continues in the way it's supposed to. So again, I would have gone up underneath the black, and so I'm going to come down through this one, then up and down, and I'm going to just take my needle back through, and if you want to you could add in another colour and weave back in the opposite direction, so you go down first and then up, and that creates little loops. That's a nice way of doing it. And while we've still got some thread, I'm going to just work with this little circle. Maybe I need to draw in another one actually, just because I've just put some blue very close. So let's do quite a small circle. Just add to my little tally just off camera so that I don't forget. So this is blanket stitch again, but I'm going to, here we did it coming in, I'm going to do blanket stitch working out now, and you can keep these regular or you can be a bit more wild. So I'm coming up on my line again, I'm coming out from my line and rocking my needle back to my line, making sure the needle passes over that working thread like that, and you want to kind of radiate your stitches, so you want them all angling into what would be the centre of the circle, so you don't want them all going straight, just like we did with this one where they all angle into the centre. You want the same to be true over here as well, but we're just pointing our stitches in the other direction. I really like these kind of spokey blanket stitch circles. you'll find that they tend to angle like, well, you'll see, they kind of look like they're spinning. They look like they've got momentum. I'm sure there's a way of making it look absolutely straight, but you tend to angle your stitches slightly back away from the direction that you're travelling, and it kind of makes it look like a Catherine wheel firework. Looks like it's rotating. I quite like that, makes it a bit more dynamic. You can see it already, look, they're slightly angled back on themselves. So again, you want to position a stitch so that it comes out where you started, and then hop over and you'll get that invisible join like that. And for circle number 12, I thought it would be fun to echo this somewhere else. So I've got some rubber washers here. You can pick these up fairly inexpensively. Let's pop one over here. I think there's quite a lot of black over there, so I'm going to do this one in green, and again you need a good long length of thread because we're going to wrap it. So this is exactly the same technique that we did with the bangle, but we're just doing a smaller version. So no need for a knot. Let me move this so that you can see what I'm doing. If you didn't see that video, I'll just show you how I did it. So I'm going to work clockwise, but I'm starting with the end of my thread running clockwise, and I want to loop my thread back on itself. This is just to get started. I'm going to take my needle through the ring and bring it out and make sure it passes over that thread of the loop. So we are going to work with quite a lot of thread, and when you are much closer to the ring, you want to make sure that that tail passes through that little loop that you've made, and that will catch it down. So we've essentially knotted our thread around the loop, and it will get easier to work with as we stitch because we'll use up some of that thread. So again, I'm forming a blanket stitch over the ring, making sure the tail goes through that little loop that I've made, and I want to pull so that my stitch lines up and sits right up against the previous one. So in from the front, through the ring, over the top of the thread loop, and we want to make sure that that tail is caught inside the loop that we've just made. And pull it so that it sits against the previous stitch. And we're going to just keep stitching like that until that washer is completely covered with thread. You can use different weights of thread if you want to. You can use textured thread. You could make a fluffy circle if you've got some eyelash yarn. You could have a go at a metallic one if you want to brave metallic thread. I think it would be easier to do this with metallic thread because it's not passing through any fabric, so the thread isn't going to wear as much as it would if you were taking it through fabric. Just keep making sure that you catch that tail until you've covered it up. Once you've done about 10 stitches, you can always trim that off if you want to, because it won't come undone. Okay, I've gone all the way around my washer and I'm going to attach that on over here, just overlapping my blue Olympic ring, and because this is a lot smaller and we've got rubber inside it rather than metal, it is a little bit more forgiving. So I'm just going to add some stitches just through that ridge at the edge to hold it in place. So I'm going up from the back through that little ridge and down again. Okay, I've added another couple of circles, so I've put a whipped back stitch circle in here, so it's very similar to what we did here, but rather than alternating backwards and forwards, we just keep going through the stitches in the same direction each time. And I've put another back stitch circle up here because I wanted to do a different stitch. I've got some black threaded up and I wanted to do a Pekinese stitch, which is quite a fun stitch. So I'm going to start here just on the inside of this blue Olympic ring. We want to start at the end of a stitch. I'm doing a different colour so it's easier to see, and I want to skip this one and take my needle underneath the next stitch like that, and then we're going to come back through the previous stitch and make sure our needle passes over that black thread. Now we're not going to pull all the way through, we're going to create a little tiny loop. Hopefully you'll be able to see it a bit better. So we're going to skip this one, go through the next one and pull through. I'm using the eye of my needle for this because it's much easier, and then we're going to go back down through the one we skipped over the top of the black thread, and we want to try and pull through so that that loop is the same size as the previous one. You can always readjust it. So skip the stitch and up through the next one. You're always going through a stitch that doesn't have any black on it yet, and then back down through the one we skipped, pull through until my loop is even. So the next stitch that I've not been through, we go up through that and then back down through the one I skipped and over the top of the black thread. So looking for the next stitch that I haven't been through, so just pull that through a little bit too much, so I'm just pulling it back, and we can always go back and adjust those loops to make sure they're all nice and even. Back down through the one that I skipped, and we just work our way along like that. This is called Pekinese stitch. It's a really lovely decorative stitch. It doesn't wear well. This is best for things that are going to be on display rather than in use all the time, because obviously these loops have got slack, so they can move. If you wanted to use an item that this stitch was used on, you could go in with just some machine cotton and just catch down each of the loops, and that would hold it in place. One of the tricks I think is to get the thread that's underneath your back stitch fairly tight, and so all the slack is in that loop. That helps quite a lot, I think. Making sure you're going over the thread that's going underneath the stitch as well helps hold everything in place. I really like the way this one is echoing those little bubbles. So all over the background we've got large bubbles surrounded by lots of teeny tiny bubbles. and I really like the way that this is echoing that. It's a nice one to do with two colours as well. So I'm just going to keep adding circles like this until I have my 21, and then I'll come back and show you what I've done. Okay, here's our 21 circles, and I hope you agree that our Olympic theme is a lot more subtle now. So I've still got my medal, still got our medals table along the bottom, but our Olympic rings have kind of merged in to the background and become part of something much more abstract and much bigger. So now we're going to put our binding on. I have shown this in a number of other videos, so I'm not going to spend loads of time showing you how to do it. Just to say, I've chosen a colour that matches this blue ribbon. I've cut some strips that are 8 centimetres wide and long enough to cover the length, folded them in half and pressed them, and then folded each side into the centre, and that gives me a binding of just about 2 centimetres, so that's going to sharpen up the edges. Always start on the front. You can see I've got a dotted line along here that shows where my border should be, and I'm going to stitch the long edges on first, so just pin these in place to give you a bit of an idea of how it's going to look when the binding is on. Like that. Then I've got some just ordinary machine cotton. You can use a matching thread if you want to, but we won't really be able to see these stitches. So I'm going to come in at the fold, just in from the edge because I can trim this back, and I'm going to come in through the fold just on the binding there, go down through all the layers, and then come back up again about a ½ centimetre further along just through the binding. So I'm just kind of applique stitching that binding on. As long as you follow those marked lines, helps to mark in your border. You can always bring back in your aperture, but I think just marking in your 2 centimetre border is enough. So I will stitch all the way along there and then fold that back at the edge of the binding like that, and stitch along there just the same. Love the back of this one, so much fun. So I'll stitch along the back of there as well, and then when I'm putting the sides on, I just fold back a little turning like that on my binding and stitch it down, butted up to the edge like that, so that we've got a neat finish. And if you want this process in more detail, I will link the video up here where I go through that. So I'm just going to put the binding on, and then I'll come back and show you August's finished panel. So here's our finished August piece, totally different from anything we've done so far before, and a really unusual colour scheme for me. I don't think I've ever done anything like this ever. I'm really happy with it though, and I really like the way those Olympic rings have become so much more subtle. We've still got all our bubbles showing through in the background. I think that was a lot of fun, and I I can imagine I'm going to use that technique again because I just love the texture that it's given to that fabric, and I'm pleased with my choice about the blue echoing that ribbon. I think that was a good option. I really hope you've enjoyed this one. It's just been a fairly low demand one, just simple techniques to create something totally abstract and just a bit of relaxing slow stitch for the summer. So, can't wait to see your finished Olympics August panels. If you are sharing on social media, don't forget to tag me at Feather Stitch House. Put it at the bottom of the screen there, just so that I'm sure to see your post. And if you are sharing on Instagram, if you use hashtag FSH Winging It 24, that groups all of our work together so we can all see what each other is doing. There's also the Facebook group, and I'll put information about that in the description below. If you have enjoyed watching this, don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps us out. And thank you so much for watching. I will link another slow stitch video up here, and I will link the Winging It 2024 playlist down here, so that if you are watching for the first time you can go back and look at all the other pieces we've created. Have a great week stitching your circles, and I will see you next week for the beginning of our September panel. Have a great week and I'll see you soon. Bye!